back to another episode of Enneagram Restored Podcast. I am your 5'4" milk chocolate sexy man of a host, Braylon Williams, and I'm so glad that you're joining me once again for another episode. But if you're new to this is a podcast that I do just talks about the Enneagram and the benefits it has in giving us a new perspective on ourselves and how we can use that perspective to transform our lives. I always say that the Enneagram is a thing that's not to box you in, but it's a thing to make you grow, make the bad better and the good best. Uh, just kind of summarizing why I do this podcast and everything. But before I tell you about what we're going to be doing in today's show, just to give you a summation of what's going on in my life, really nothing. Um, to be honest with you, I don't really have anything that's happening in my life right now other than just work and everything. Um, got some exciting things happening, um, which you'll hear more about everything that's going on as far as some things that I'm trying to relaunch. One being the E&E Collective, in which at this point, when you're hearing this episode, you should have heard a lot about this at this point already, because this is the pre-recording this episode right here with Jeanne today. Uh, but by this point, you should have heard a lot about the E&E Collective already, but that is opening back up, or at least trying to get that started again. Um, but yeah, other than that, there's not much going on. So with that being said, let me just tell you about today's show. Today, it is just a joy and pleasure to have Jeanne Stevens back on the podcast again. You know, I had her back here last year to talk about her book, What's Here Now. And just to kind of give you a little bit recap on who she is, Jeanne is the pastor of Soul City Church in Chicago, and she lives in Chicago with her husband Jared and their two children. Her passion is to help people wake up to their purpose as they pursue a life of wholehearted freedom. Now, Jeanne is a wonderful person. She is a sought after speaker, leader, and writer. Like I said last time when I had her on this podcast, we talked about her book, What's Here Now. And it just so happens that within that book, one of the chapters, chapter 10 to be exact, is entitled Waiting and Control Waiting Rooms. So with that chapter being named that, and being that waiting is the theme of this season, I just knew I had to hit her up once again and say, hey, let's talk about this some more. Let's talk about waiting. Let's talk about it all. And so here we are, and we're going to be talking about waiting today. But before we get into the topic, I just want to hit it off with Jeanne. So let's head right into the episode and get to talking to Jeanne. Well, let me just say officially, welcome back to the podcast. It's good to have you back.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here with you.
Um, well, it's been a while, so how about we just do a little bit catching up first? How's life been for you recently?
Well, life is well. I have two kids, and one of them is a senior, so in
Oh,
high school. So we are navigating all things senior year, senioritis,
I remember that
getting
all too well.
college decisions all sorted out, and what next year is going to look like. So that's been a lot of fun. And then my daughter is about to turn 16, so she's about to get her driver's license. So I have been in all things the land of adolescence, and it's been lots of fun.
Well, does your oldest one is a boy, right?
Yep, my
Yeah.
son's name is Elijah.
And,
Yep.
and does he have like what is his top pick college so far?
He's down to two. He got into a lot of places. He's narrowed it down to two. He is between Baylor University in Waco, Texas, and Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana.
Oh, those are great ones. I wish I would went to Baylor just so I could have been close to Chip and Joanna.
There you go. There you go. Yeah.
That
So it's exciting.
it would have been a fun time. But instead, I came to Springfield. All colleges are great in their own way. I
Hmm.
wish him the best. He doesn't know me, but tell him I wish him the best
Thank
in his
you.
college endeavors. Um, I've got to know this, like a little bit insider. So, are you thinking about writing another book?
And great question. I am actually. Obviously, I released What's Here Now 2 years ago. And yeah, I am thinking about it and navigate. I think it's actually, has it been 2 years or 3 years? I can't even
Yeah.
remember. So I'm contemplating a book on walking through transitions, the new, the needed, and the not so welcome transitions of life.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Can I go ahead and put a pre-order in right now?
Yes, it might be a minute, but yes, absolutely.
I'm going to definitely get that one too, and it already sounds like a great book. Um, but speaking of your books, in your book, What Is Here Now, you wrote a chapter specifically on waiting, chapter 10.
Hmm.
And that's kind of where I want to take this conversation and start off and just talk about active waiting. And in that beginning of it, you put this quote in there: "When you're waiting, you're not doing nothing. You're doing the most important something there is. You're allowing your soul to grow up. If you can't be still and wait, you can't become what God created you
Hmm.
to be." And that, of course, is, I think I'm pronouncing this right, Sue Monk Kid. Is that how you say
Smut
it?
kid, yeah.
Um, and that was just a fantastic quote. And kind of my questions around this, first and foremost, is like the significance that quote plays in your life, and what
Hmm.
is active waiting to you, and how have you seen it at hand in your life?
Yeah. I love that question because there isn't a single human that escapes the human reality without having to navigate waiting. It
Yeah,
is part of being human. It is part of walking and stumbling and running and falling and getting back up in the human story. And so much of waiting is one of the primary ways in which God transforms us. There is not a single person that has escaped this life without having to wait on something. There's not a single person in the scriptures that didn't have to wait either on God or wait on a circumstance to change or wait on something in them to grow and to mature and to shift and to change. And so, one of the great ways that we become more of who we're created to be is through waiting. And waiting is a very active process. But the tension is that we think it's inactive. We think
yes,
that we've been halted. We think that we've been paused. We think that we've been put in a timeout. And yet, waiting is this growing up process. In that quote that you just shared by Sumant Kidd, she wrote the book When the Heart Waits. And so much of our transformation happens in the midst of that pause. It happens as we take stock of what's really going on. It happens as we reflect. It happens as we navigate our way through the things that we can't force to happen, and we have to release ourselves to waiting for them to happen. It happens through the process of surrender, which nobody likes to do. We like to be in
no,
control. We like action. We like movement. And so much of life is those things, being in a posture of pause and trusting that God is working behind the scenes.
yeah, and I myself am currently in this what I call the most drastic waiting period that I've ever been in
Mhm.
so far. It has been at least 3 years so far of just nothingness and just kind of every mundane type of things.
Mhm.
And it's just been partly, I think the reason why it's lasted this long for me is that I have been kind of stubborn and just taking that moment to pause. Um,
Mhm.
every every time that it just felt like, all right, I need to quit doing all my extra activities. I'm always like,
Mhm.
but I can continue doing this. I can just take out more time here to reflect later on in the day. Never do it. So then, by some force of nature, whether I'm getting sick or something, I'm just forced to pause. And uh, finally, I'm like, I'm getting tired because sickness was like the main way I was being forced to just take a moment to rest. Like, maybe I need to take note of this and just stop it. I'm like, all right, let's do it. Finally, my stubbornness finally gave way. But this next question I want to ask you. It's kind of a unique one. And I don't know if he. I'm kind of just interested to see because when I was reading that quote, and I was just kind of thinking about how he described things. I'm a very visual person, so I was kind of wondering if you could paint a picture of the soul growing, how would you paint it? Like, what things would you put on that canvas?
Hmm. If I could paint a picture of the soul growing, I'll be honest, the first images that started to come across my mind were first the images of roots. And I started thinking about what soil are you planting yourself in? Are you
Yeah,
planting yourself in fertile soil? Are you planting yourself in soil that is going to get watered? Are you planting yourself in soil that's going to get cultivated, meaning somebody's going to garden it and pull weeds out and pluck the things that could actually steal nutrition from it? So I first started thinking about where am I planted? In order for my soul to grow, anyone's soul to grow, you have to be planted in good soil. You have to be
yeah,
planted around people that want you to grow. You have to be planted around conditions where other people that are planted in that garden are also growing. And so, if you go plant yourself next to a whole bunch of dead bushes, it's kind of a sure sign that the odds are not high in your
yeah.
favor that you're going to grow, because there's actually proof there that the soil wasn't strong. The soil wasn't rich in nutrient. And so, are you being surrounded by people that are also growing? So the first image that I had around, how do you get your soul to grow and what images come to mind is the soil that you're planted in. I would also say that uh, on the other side, are you open to being pruned? Are you open to being cut back? Are you open to being shaped in such a way that you can have greater growth? Uh, you know, in John 15, it talks about the vine and the branches, and it talks about that the gardener actually at times cuts us back. And that's never to hurt us. That's always to bring deeper healing into our life so that there can be greater growth in our life. And so, are you in a community? Are you in a connected space and place where you can be cut back, where somebody can tell you the truth, where somebody can offer you feedback, where somebody can say, hey, I want to reflect back to you, this was my experience with you? And so I think a lot of it has to do with conditions. I think the conditions of the soil and conditions of allowing yourself to be open to the work of the gardener. And then I will say that all growth happens in seasons. There are winter seasons where it looks like nothing is growing and we are utterly dormant. There are seasons of fall where things are preparing for that dormant winter. Then there's spring. Everybody loves spring because it's new
Oh
growth,
yes,
right? There's the excitement of buds showing up on trees, and little sprouts coming up out of the ground. And then summertime obviously is just the delight of the sun and being able to flourish. So, but all growth happens in seasons. But what I want to say about that is all growth is still happening. Even if it's not noticeable, it's still happening. And so I think a soul that is growing is able to identify, this is the season I'm in. They're able to say, I'm walking through winter right now, or I'm walking through spring or summer or fall. And so it's important that we have an awareness of the season that our soul is growing through.
I love that. Um, I'm this software I'm using is this is the second time I'm using it. Like every time I move my hair or something, there's just thumbs up that comes across the screen. I'm like, how can I get that off? And now it's doing fireworks.
There you go. Well, that's good.
I don't know how to fix it. It bothers me. And so I'm like just trying to stand still so I don't cause it to go off. So I gotta get that figured out. But um, last week I was putting together all the questions, finalizing all the questions I wanted to talk about today, and I was actually doing it in a classroom because I'm a substitute teacher and it's a high school classroom, which I love doing high school because it's basically I go in and I do my own thing because they're at the age of where you don't have to really watch over them too much. Now the conversations, I'm like, did I talk this way in high school? Were we talking the same type of things? It kind of curiouses me. Like, I hope we weren't this weird when I was this age, but I was putting together all the final questions, and I've read this chapter multiple times to prepare for this conversation. But last week when I was reading it, there were things that just popped out at me like it was the first time or like in this new way. And one of the things that popped out at me was when you said there's this common activity we engage in while waiting. We try to figure out who is still in front of us and gauge how long we'll have to wait. And like subconsciously, we do that a lot, mostly subconsciously, but sometimes also very conscious, where we're like, all right, that person's in front of me of getting married or getting the job. But it's just like this thing that we do mentally a lot. I'm like, not only how many times have I done it, but like how many times has everybody else done that subconsciously?
Mhm.
And is that something that we need to take note of that we do when we're asking ourselves, when will I get in that relationship? When will I get married? When will I get that dream job or
Mm.
get that dream
Mhm.
car, that dream
Mhm.
house, anything, you name it. And so it was just that moment of that recognition of, oh wait, that is something that we do subconscious. That
Mhm.
it's one of those things you never realize. You think of it a lot of times, as you pointed out in the book, as in this physical space. You're in a waiting room, like, all right, it's 11 o'clock, and I've got somewhere else to be at 2. The doctor still hasn't came out to see me. When will I be next? Type of thing. We think of it a lot in that context, but never in the context of life. Um, so I didn't write this down, and this is just a question that just came to mind. I was saying this. What in what type of context, life wise, has that come into play for you?
Yeah, I would say that, some of what you're getting at is the tension that everybody faces when they compare where they're at to where somebody else is at. And it's been famously said that comparison is the thief of joy, of which I would
Yeah,
agree, but I would also say that comparison is the thief of contentment. And the reason it's the thief of contentment is it sends the unconscious message that where you are is not where you should be.
yeah,
And yet, where you are is exactly where you should be. Where you are is exactly where God has you. And it is part of your spiritual transformation where you are. And every time we, look to the person to our right or to our left and we say, well, gosh, what looks like they don't have to sit in the waiting room as long as I do. It looks like
yeah,
they got the dream job or they got the dream partner, or they got the dream house. And man, they were only in the waiting room for 5 minutes and I've been sitting here for 5 years. You know, Comparison, what it does is it robs us of our capacity to be content with where we are. And then what it does is it either upgrades us to believe that we're better than, or it downgrades us to believe that we're less than. And so we either are stuck with pride. Um, I got through the waiting room faster than they did. My situation is better than theirs. Or here I am still sitting in the waiting room, so I'm less than. I'm worse off. And neither of those solutions, better than or less than, allow us to be content with where we are. And
yeah,
so, I would say that comparison really does keep us from the contentment of where God wants us to be. And the only place where God can grow you is where you are. It's exactly where you're planted. And so you're going to miss out on all that growth if you're just looking to the person to your right or to your left going, well, I wish I had their situation, or I wish I had their
yeah,
situation. You don't. You're not them. You're not living their story. You're not living their life. And 9 out of 10 times, they're only showing you the highlight reel of their life. You don't see all of the challenges and the tensions that they're facing that aren't, exposed and in the public eye. And so, it's never everything that we think that it is. And so, whenever I find myself in that situation and I look around and I'm like, man, I wish I had this, or I wish that, my story looked more like this person's story. I have to remind myself I'm only seeing 1% of what they're wanting me to see. I'm only
Yeah.
seeing a portion of their life. And if I go to think that that's the life that I want, I actually am doing harm to the life that God has invited me to live.
Yeah, I love that, because what if your life is meant to be better than theirs, and but by comparing yourself, you're actually making yours, like you said, worse off than what the greatness you could have achieved,
Yeah.
because you're trying to duplicate their story rather than write your own
Hmm.
original narrative. Um, and you also talk about the richest moments um, in life have been your active waiting moments. Um, so this might be a tough one to kind of parse out, but what would you describe as being the most richest active waiting moment that you've had so far?
I would say that I don't know if this would be the most, but I'll just share some of the things that come to mind. And you're specifically looking at moments of waiting.
Yeah,
Yeah. I would say, there have been significant moments of waiting for a broken relationship to find healing, and not being able to force it to heal, not being able to control it into healing, not being able to muscle it into healing, but truly having to wait and trust in God that God is at work in that person's life as much as God is at work in my life. I would say that I can talk about it now, hindsight, because I've seen some healing and I've
yeah,
seen some reconciliation. But I will say, in the middle of it, in the messy middle of that, and in the messy middle of that waiting, oh, it felt painful. And it just felt, um, yeah, that ache of God, this relationship it's not as it should be. And this hurts. And this isn't um, productive in my
yeah,
heart. And so, how do I fix this, knowing that God wasn't asking me to do anything to fix it, other than God was just inviting me to wait? So, I would say though that really grew me. That brought so much transformation because I was actively waiting on God, and I wasn't doing something that looked active.
yeah,
I was surrendering, I was trusting, I was choosing to be kind to a person that felt like an enemy. I was choosing to um, speak blessing over their life. I was choosing to not speak ill of them to somebody else. So those were all things that were very, very active, but
yeah,
didn't feel active. And then God, in a miraculous way, did bring some healing to that relationship and did bring some restoration. And I can now look and go, wow, that was so active when it was happening, but it felt like all I was doing was just sitting around twiddling my thumbs. Like, what, God, when is this going to get better? When is this relationship going to get restored? When is this going to get healed? So that's one of the main ones that comes to mind. And I would guess for many of your listeners, they've had relationships that have fallen apart, or have experienced brokenness, or have experienced, some kind of pain or some kind of hurt in it. And so it's really hard to go, what should I do? Because we
yeah,
want to do And oftentimes, the way that God wants to restore things is by us actually actively choosing to be so that God can do the doing.
Yeah. And if I remember right, you said you're an Enneagram 8, right?
Correct.
And so there, just in that story alone, I love how you use the word force because as an 8, they're a part of the assertive stance. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things is that, 8s, 3s, and 7s, they're going to go out and make it happen, being a part of
Yeah,
that assertive group. And like, they're not going to wait for people to give them the right to make something right or to do what
that's
they want to
right.
do. And so just to, as an assertive type, to see that that's something that you've learned is such a beautiful thing because that's
Yeah.
something that I'm learning myself because I too am an assertive type. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's just that, all right, I know I can make it happen, but what would happen if I just let it happen type of thing?
Yeah, that's
That
right.
balance of making. And it's kind of like Lady Justice, you got the size of the scale, like balance
Mm-hmm.
making it or not. So,
Yeah.
but um, there's something that's comes to my mind, and if it comes to me, I'm gonna bring it up. But um, this next thing that I want to talk about, it hit me so hard last week that I actually took my phone wallpaper, which is a wallpaper of Snoopy on his doghouse, and I took it to Canva. It's like, all right, I'm writing this quote on this wallpaper and putting it on my phone as a daily reminder. And so ever since then, it's been on there every time I open my phone. It's like, oh, that's a good reminder. And that reminder is this: active waiting is dynamic. It must include vulnerability. It's a conversation that is active and moving, even though we feel like our circumstances are standing still. And you
Mm-hmm.
touched on that a lot already. Um, and I think the reason why I'm falling apart here. I think the reason why it hit me so differently is because when I first read through your book, I didn't consider myself in a waiting period. Looking back, I realized that I had already been in that period of
Mm-hmm.
season, but at the moment, it wasn't something I was considering. So I realized that this entire chapter is powerful on waiting and trying to lessen control, but it wasn't something that I could connect with because mentally there was a disconnect in where I was, reality, and what I was thinking mentally. Mentally, I'm thinking I'm fine. I'm on the route of success. I am doing better than ever in my life, but really I was doing worse than ever, honestly. And so, but just to go back and read that and say, oh, there's a gentle reminder. Um, so as I'm finishing out all this prep, I probably put a lot of. I tell you, when I started putting these questions together, it's probably been like 3 months before I even emailed your assistant. I'm so like, um, just to have things hit me so differently here at the tail end of prep before the conversation happens is like, why didn't I think of this from the get go? This is a great point to go from. Um, but one of the last things that popped into my mind as I'm going through that chapter is, what am I holding on to?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what am I too afraid to let go of?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and even now, as I think of that questions as I'm putting it out there, and this is a question that I want to invite everyone who's listening and watching to think of too. What are you holding on to? There's this one situation that comes to mind that I don't really like to talk about much. I talk about to myself in my head because it's that painful, but it's not a situation where like I'm willing and open to talk to somebody about it. Uh, and there's a point of transformation right there, right? It's like, oh, you recognize that here is a painful story. Stories don't heal unless they get told, right?
That's right.
So, and it's just that reminder of, all right, active waiting. It's a conversation. You're and to have a conversation, there's got to be two people talking. And even though I tell people as a joke all the time, I got 25 voices in my head. Those voices don't count in that conversation. So um, it was just that reading through this, and again, I know I said this probably a million times last time we talked, but thank you so much for just writing this entire book, but especially this chapter. Because looking back, I'm like, I should have connected with this chapter a long time ago. I probably would have been so far better off had I done that. Um, but that's pretty much everything that I have on the topic of active waiting, unless there's something else that you have before I kind of move
Mm.
into a different topic.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. That's
Yeah.
great.
So another thing that has been like, I kind of, this next topic I want to talk about, I entitled it Overcome the Need for Complex Prayers. This has been a topic that I've been just dying to talk with a pastor. And so I'm like, I'm having Jeanne on. She's a pastor. Why not talk to her about it? But it seems to me, and this is like a pet peeve, people think that they need to, and I've been guilty of it too sometimes, that we've got to pray these big, large, complex prayers to really get our needs answered. So I just want to start off by first asking you this: Is this like something that you kind of see too at work within the church as a whole?
Yeah, I would say prayer is a conversation, and it is a two-person conversation. It's a conversation that you're having with God and that God's having with you. And so, uh, same way you and I are having a conversation.
Right.
There's two of us here. It's a dynamic, active, moving back and forth relationship. And even in those moments when you're talking and I'm being quiet, or in those moments where I'm talking and you're being quiet, doesn't mean that we're not communicating. We're still
Yeah.
communicating. And that's prayer. Prayer is just communicating. And I think that we oftentimes make prayer way more complex than it needs to be. It's a conversation. In fact, last year, I felt very compelled to. The first thing that we do every Tuesday morning as a staff team is we meet in our prayer hall. And, we have a wonderful time of prayer, and it's a great way to kick off the day. But I started feeling like we're making this too complex. We're doing too many things to add all kinds of structures to this. And so I said, no more. The structures all have to get thrown out. We're going to pray through 3 prompts every single Tuesday at 10 a.m. And here's the prompts. They're really easy to remember. Sorry, thanks, help. God,
Wow.
I'm sorry. I messed this thing up. Um I I missed it when I was talking to this person, or I was unkind, or God, I'm sorry that I've been depending on myself, or that I've, just been muscling my way through life. Whatever it is, sorry. God, thank you. Thank you for all of these unbelievable blessings that you've put into my life. Thank you that I'm breathing right now. Thank you that I have fresh water. Thank you that there's a roof over my head. Thank you for friendships. Thank you for what are the things that come to your heart and to your mind with thanks. And then, God, I need your help. I'm navigating this challenge, or we're up against this circumstance and we don't know what to do, and we need your help. And so we shifted all of our prayers to fall in those 3 categories: sorry, thanks, and help. Sometimes we move around the order, but it's usually, it looks like that. And gosh, to have the simplicity of praying in those 3 strategic ways has radically changed our staff culture, and so beautifully changed our church culture. One of our phrases that we say at Soul City all the time is that we want prayer to be people's first response, not their last resort. That
Yeah.
whenever something comes into your life, whether it's something that you're super excited about, whether it's something that you're super scared about, that prayer is your first response, not your last resort. And we're seeing that happen as we have really simplified prayer down to those 3 categories.
Wow. I I am just like taking all that in because like even as you said those 3 things, sorry, thanks, I need your help. It's just I'm thinking now, how can I take that same routine that you guys do and implement it in my life? Because there are just so many times where, like, mentally, and uh, I'm on the worship team at my church, which I'm taking a. I've said, all right, it's about time I take a break from worship team, and so, but one of the things that we I hope they still do, but one of the things we did was before we start our sound checks, before every service on Sundays and Wednesdays, we would walk around the auditorium and just pray over the seats and just make it a place of prayer, just to welcome the Spirit in. And a lot of times I would find myself just just so roughed out in life that like I can't even pray then. And so I'm like, God, you, you know my needs. You know what's going on. Just bless it. And that's my prayer. And the rest of the time I'm just
Mhm.
walking around just in the Spirit. And it's like I want to say more, but I can't even articulate what is happening. So how can I say more? And so even then, I believe had I known what you just said, how you guys do it now,
Mhm.
sorry, thanks, and help, I probably that probably would put me on the right standing foot to even be like, all right, sorry, I've done this wrong, and that's what's prohibiting me from being able to say, all right, here I am, because I admittedly I'm a prideful person. It's not one of the things that I hold close to my heart, and I like but it is one of my downfalls. And so just to be able to admit that is like the first hand to say, all right, this is probably why my articulation of prayers has been so prohibited, because I have not been willing to admit what I've done wrong, because pride, um, maybe you know it better, but the verse in the Bible that says, I think it's like pride is the uh, downfall or something like that.
Yeah, pride before the fall.
Yeah, pride before the fall. And so just,
God God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. He
yes.
elevates the humble. Mhm.
And so you said sorry, and I was like, wow, just revelation, just all in that moment. And I was like, all right, was not ready for this type of conversation, but here it is. So, but I love that all. And now my iPad is not working. Um, here we go. Hey, everybody, I just want to take a quick break from the show to say that I love having conversations with all of my listeners. And one of the ways that I do this is by engaging through social media. And you can follow the podcast at Enneagram Store Podcast on both Instagram and Facebook. I look forward to engaging with you all more on those platforms. And so I bring that up, and we kind of talked about this, and the reason why I say that is because when people, from what I feel, is that complex prayers make us seem more spiritual, make us seem closer to God, whereas oftentimes for me, you can speak on this too, it's felt like the less complex prayers have made me seem closer to God. Would you agree with that, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think all prayer can fall into one of those three categories.
Yeah,
Thanksgiving, the need for confession, um, and the need for the ever present help of God. So,
yeah. And so, which all of that kind of roots us back to where it all starts from, is the unknown. And that's kind of the
mhm.
next thing I want to talk about, and is what, in your opinion, makes the unknown so scary to us humans?
Well, the unknown brings us face to face with all of life being unknown. And any sense of control that we think we have is a mirage. It's a vapor. It's a film. It's not 100% rock solid and true, because at any moment, whatever we think is under our control, we can be reminded in a second that it's not. And so I think part of what causes us so much discomfort with the unknown is that it's a revealer of all of the other things where perhaps we feel insecure, or perhaps where we feel shaky, or where we feel like our footing is not solid. And So it's just a exposer of the places that already exist where we are feeling uh, that sense of, gosh, I don't know what's
Yeah.
next. I'm not sure how this is going to go. And uh, while everybody would say, gosh, that's a vulnerable place to be, and vulnerability is so much better, and it is. It's vulnerability is us in our true authentic selves. Nobody likes to feel vulnerable
Yeah.
because it feels scary, and we like to feel secure more than we like to feel scared. But it's actually in that place where we experience so much transformation, where we experience so much growth, when we actually get honest with ourselves about where we do feel insecure, or where we do feel like we're we're not clear on what's next. And it's an opportunity for us to surrender and to relax into the love of God, and to trust that uh, all of this ultimately can fall under the big category of mystery.
Yeah.
You know, there's not a single person that really knows how it all is shaking out and working, other than God.
Yeah.
And so, whenever we can be at peace with the mysteries of God, it's like whenever somebody has a moment of onset grief, and there's loss, usually what they want to do is ask the question, why did this happen? Why did this fall apart? Why did I um, lose this person that I love in this way? Or why did I lose this job? Or why did I lose this marriage or this relationship, or whatever it may be? And why is not a reliable question, because why often is a question that we'll never get an answer to. But
Yeah.
asking the question, what am I to learn from this? What is it that God wants to do in and through me because of this? What is the growth that is needed in my life that perhaps this circumstance is going to open the door to? Now, that's a reliable question. And that is a question that we can't find answers to. But why? That's a question of mystery. That's a question of ultimately us wanting to be God, and us wanting to be omnipotent and all powerful, and it's us wanting to essentially be God instead of God being God.
Yeah. And so you said the question of what, and I was just thinking, what about the question of where? Where is this situation taking me
Mm-hmm.
um, in my spirituality, in my
Mm-hmm.
emotional health, mental health?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think those two questions would be great things to
Oh
go
yeah.
hand in hand with each other.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you did in that same chapter is that you have these list of 5 questions, um, and the one that really stuck out to me, and we talked about this a little bit already, is, "Am I willing to surrender to the unknown?" So I'm a, I wouldn't say I'm a newbie at this. I am probably a straight out the womb baby to this surrendering stuff because it's not easy for me at all. But what have what are some practical things that have helped you become better practice at surrendering to the unknown?
Mm-hmm. I would say to remember every other time in my past that I surrendered to the unknown and it worked out. That is the gift of God's faithfulness. That is the gift of God's track record. And so it's it's the reliability that every time I've done this, it's been to my benefit. It's been to my uh, change. It's been to my growth. And so I think surrendering to the unknown, and knowing that in the past it was good. So that means in the present it will be good. And that means in the future it will be good. because God works everything together for good.
Yeah.
So it's that. I think it also allows me to remember where I am positioned in the writing of my life and of my story. It reminds me that I'm a co-author. I'm not a solo author. I think that oftentimes we don't want to surrender to the unknown because we think that we're the only writer of our story and we share the pen rights with God. We are
Right.
co-authoring our lives and our stories with God. And so it's those moments where you go, you know what, God, I'm not sure how this is going to all work out. I'm not sure how you're going to move on my behalf and for my good. And so I'm surrendering to what I do not know and to what I do not see and to how you're going to work this all out. And I'm trusting that that's what you do. You work it all out, God. You are a way better writer than I am. You're a way better author than I am. And so I trust your penmanship here on in this story.
I love that. And I'm just taking a moment to just sit with everything you just said because it's just so amazing. I'm always, last time we talked, I was blown away by your words and just, it was like drinking sweet nectar from a honey tree. Honestly, you're just so wise and your words are just so beautiful. And I love them. Um,
Thank you.
but I don't really have anything else on the serious note. I do have a fun little closing thing, closing Would You Rather segment, if you don't mind doing that. But
Yeah,
before you go there,
absolutely.
is there anything else that you would like to add before you do that?
No, I mean, I would just say to any of your listeners that find themselves in a season of waiting and they find themselves rehearsing the future or maybe even rehashing the past, to uh, give yourself the gift and the reminder of this very sacred question: what's here now? What's here now? What are you sensing in your body? What are you feeling in your heart? What are you thinking in your mind? And can you give yourself the gift of receiving this present moment as a present, as a gift? God has you here for a reason. And you may be waiting, you may be in a place that you don't want to be, but you are here for a reason and you are not alone. God is with you. And in your waiting, would you welcome God's presence to do what only God's presence can do? So that would be my only thought that I would share.
Words cannot express the amount of gratitude that I have for each and every one of my listeners. So, if you would like to support Enneagram Store podcast even more, you can do so by sending a tip by going to enneagramrestore.com/tip jar. That's enneagramrestore.com/tip jar. That's ENNEAGRAMRESTORE.com/TIPJAR. EnneagramRestore.com/tip jar. All right, I love it. Well, let's end this episode on some fun, lightheartedness. I got a couple would you rather's. And I tried to pick out some that I would think you would like the most, being that this is our second conversation. So hopefully you don't hate me too much after you answer these. The first one: would you rather have to give up coffee or give up pizza for a year?
Oh, I pizza. I'd rather give up pizza.
Wow.
Even though I love pizza, I can't go without my morning coffee.
Oh, I'm the opposite. I'm like, I could think I can go without coffee for a while, but pizza. Let's see. Would you rather only be able to go on cruises or only be able to go to Disney World for vacations?
I've never been on a cruise. Never been on a cruise, so I guess I'd give up cruises.
Uh, oh, you're missing out. I've only been on one, and I was like five, but I'm a lover of the sea, even though I can't swim.
Mhm.
I always said, if I ever get a houseboat, well, that might be, just hope it doesn't get a hole in there or something, because then I'm just dead. But yeah, both of those are great places, though. I love them both. Um, this one is I picked this one because it has something that I absolutely hate in it. Would you rather have damp socks or always have a pebble in your shoe?
Hmm. Tell me the first one again. Would you rather have?
Damp socks, wet socks.
Hmm. I guess I'd have to go with the pebble in my shoe because that sounds miserable having damp socks.
I was hoping you picked that one because I'm the same
Yeah.
way. Like, I can't stand. I A lot of my tennis shoes are running shoes, so they have holes in them for air. And like when it rains, worst days of my life. My socks are just drenched in wetness, and I'm like, all right, I
Mhm.
need to get home, put them on the heater, get them dry. But um, and this, I forgot to ask you this one. Would you rather be given $1 million tomorrow or $10 million 10 years from now?
$10 million 10 years from now.
Oh, there's that wiseness right there again. 'Cause I want it right now, instant gratification. Um,
Right?
the last one is: would you rather travel back in time to meet your ancestors or travel forward in time to meet your descendants?
I think I'd want to meet my descendants.
Oh, that's pretty neat. Well, before we just close out, usually I tell people this, but I'm doing it little different now. How about you tell everybody where they can find you, and all that, so people can
Great.
connect with you
Yeah. You
more?
can find me at jeanniestevens.com, JeanneStevens.com. You can find all things related to the book and different projects that I'm a part of there. And if you want to check out the church that I'm a part of, it's called Soul City Church, Soul City Church. And you can find us there at soulcitychurch.com.
Well, I love that. Uh, I'm glad I'm not the only one who has to put emphasis on the soul part, because I always feel like I'm saying something different when I just try to say regular soul. It sounds
Yeah.
like Seoul, some I don't know, but yeah. Again,
Mhm.
as always, and for sure, just let me know when that next book comes out because I'm gonna buy it, I'm gonna read it, and we're gonna do another one of these because it sounds like a
All
good
right.
topic. So I'll put in my name.
Mhm.
I'm gonna email Amazon and be like, hey, put me on the pre-order list whenever it comes out. Just add my name there.
Well,
But yeah,
thank you.
once again, thank you for coming back and having a conversation with me. It's been a pleasure to have you again.
Thank you so much. So good to see you again.
All right. As always, don't forget that you can also follow Enneagram Store Podcast on Instagram, um, and now also on Facebook as well at Enneagram Store Podcast. Uh, and then if you're listening or watching this, I hope you will leave a review, because when you leave a review, it tells all those platforms, hey, this is a great podcast, has amazing guests on it, and they're talking about some bountiful, beautiful things that people need to hear about. And so you can do that a couple of ways. You could just go directly on Apple Podcasts and leave a review, or on Spotify and leave a rate, or on YouTube, where these videos are posted. Or you can go to enneagramrestore.com/review, and it will give you direct links to either one of those options. So uh, it's been a great time. As always, I want you to remember until next time that the Enneagram doesn't define you, but it does bring restoration. It helps reshape your thinking and habits.